We're going to try our yoga session today, starting lying on our bellies, because it gives us a little bit of a different sensation, a little bit different area of concentration on our breath as we get started. So we're going to make sure our spine is nice and straight. Our feet can be pointed toward the outside or toward the inside, wherever we feel most comfortable. We can let our cheek rest on our hands, but better yet, let our forehead rest on our hands, so that we can make a pocket for our breath in that space between our arms. And we're going to start, as we always do, concentrating on our breath and noticing as the belly moves out on our inhale. It's limited by the floor beneath us, so we're probably going to feel a little bit more work through the rib cage. The serrator anterior muscles hook up from the first through the ninth rib like fingers, back to our scapula, and when our scapula is resting, those muscles work with the intercostal muscles between the rib cage to help open up the ribs, pull them apart on our inhale. So we'll pay attention to that, pay attention to the sensations in the lower back. From this position a little more intense, and think about our Ujjayi breath, making the sound of the ocean as we think about our breath moving as an ocean wave. And we're going to remember as we go through our yoga session today that yoga is a very personal thing, that we are the only ones that know the sensations we feel in our body, where we feel tightness, where we feel spaciousness, where we feel as though we've got the muscles working at a comfortable range, that we're not causing any pain or any strain. Remembering that yoga is not how any pose looks, that a simple pose done with total attention is advanced yoga. What matters is how the position feels for us. And thinking as we go through our practice today that if you want to go a little deeper into the poses, do something different, this is all within your power. Do not let my limitations be your limitations. I'm a little more than a month away from being 80 years old, so what I can do today is not the same as I could do when I was your age. Do what you can without being driven by your ego, but by your common sense. As we start to warm up, we're going to lift our chin and bring our hand around our side, palm facing up. And then as we slowly lower our head, we're going to start swinging that arm around. When it gets about even with our shoulder, we're going to turn the palm down. So we're not only doing the abduction and adduction, but we're doing some rotation as well. Loosening up to that shoulder. We're going to bring our hand to our side. We're going to lift the hand up, leading with the heel of the hand as we continue to lift our chin, and we're going to make a fist, leading with the back of the wrist as we bring it down. So we're not only working again through the shoulder, but we're also flexing through the wrist. Opening and closing our fingers gives us, who have arthritis in our fingers, stiffness in our hands, a little bit more activity, bringing warmth and blood. Now we're going to switch to the opposite side. I'm going to repeat the same ones on this slide, just for the visual image of the camera. So hand around to the side, lifting chin as we do the rotation through the shoulder, dropping chin down as we snow angel the hand around to our side. And then bringing that hand down to rest. We're going to start lifting again, leading with the heel. I will switch to the opposite arm. Trying to keep the body balanced by doing an equal amount of work on both the left and the right side in each pose that we do. Now we're going to add to that lift of the arm, lift of the opposite leg. Switching to the opposite side, supporting our hand with the arm that's not doing the lifting. And opposite arm and leg. When we're thinking about lifting the leg, thinking about the psoas muscle that hooks up onto our rib cage and down to that inside of the femur. So we're trying to lift from low on the rib cage rather than just at the groin. And we're going to come back to center. And we're going to keep our hand at our side. We're going to turn our chin out to the side as we push through those fingertips down toward our feet. So we're getting a bend in the opposite side, stretching the muscles. We'll stay on this side. We're going to plant our hand flat on the floor, make a 90-degree angle with our arm, elbow over our wrist. We're going to pulse on that back hip, rotate across the belly, and take ourselves to a twist, lifting as high as we like. Exhaling, slowly coming back to center, pulsing on the far hip, twisting through the rib cage, up into the shoulder. Now we're going to add a little movement through the leg. So as we start twisting, we're going to take that leg and pull the knee up toward our hand. Come back to center, straightening out the spine, bringing legs together. And then we'll repeat those poses on the opposite side. So we're going to start with our hand at the side. As we turn our chin out toward our shoulder, we're going to push down as far as we can behind us. Trying to get a really good stretch from the hip through the rib cage, pulling that shoulder as far as we can over to the moving arm. And then coming back to center again, planting that hand on the floor. We're going into a twist by pulsing on the hip. That's away from the supporting arm, rotating through the rib cage, coming out to the side, back to center. And again, adding the leg movement to help loosen up through the knee, the hip area. And we're going to come back and loosen up a little bit more through the legs. So we're going to lift our feet off the floor. We're going to widen our knees just a little bit further so they're barely outside the hips. We're going to let the feet flop out to either side as we internally rotate through the hip joint. And we're going to cross at the ankles. Open and close. Trying to alternate ankles. Nice slow inhale as we open and exhale as we come together. And dropping our feet to the floor, we're going to push up, come into a plank and leave those ankles crossed as we do a little bit of pushing up and down. Now we're going to come to all fours. We're going to stretch our arms straight in front of us. We're going to push back into as deep of a child's pose as we can, but then we're going to come forward, maybe into a plank, but maybe not that far. Just rocking back and forth to loosen up through the wrist and the shoulders and the knees, the hips. The next time we come forward, we're going to come into a plank, making a straight line from the tip of our head down through our knees, and then into our chaturanga, pushing back up, back into our child's pose. Coming forward, if you want to take this to a full plank, we can lift our knees, bending our elbows in our chaturanga, dropping our knees as we push back into a child's pose. Another time coming forward, kneeling our full plank, knees down or up in our chaturanga, back into our child's pose. Coming forward again into our plank of choice, chaturanga, back up, and this time we'll come into a down dog, pushing those shoulders back toward our toes. And we're going to step forward with one foot, then the other, so that we can come to a standing pose. We'll do a sun salute, a couple of sun salutes actually. As we inhale, we're going to stretch high to the sky, exhaling into our back bend. Tailbone pushes forward, iliac crest comes up. Inhaling into our extended mountain. Exhaling into our fold. Stepping back into our lunge. Both feet back into our down dog. Forward into our plank. Chaturanga. Cobra. Down dog. Lunge. Fold. Extended mountain. And another time through, stretching as high as we can to the sky. Arching into our back bend. Coming forward into our fold. Stepping back into our lunge. Down dog. Plank. Chaturanga. Cobra. Down dog. Watching that the feet aren't too far back before we step forward into our lunge. Both feet together in our fold. Snow angel, the hands around. And now we're going to give equal time. We did our Surya Namaskar, sun salutes. Now we're going to do a moon salute. But we're going to do this holding each pose instead of working with our breath. So we're first going to find our mountain pose. Feet parallel, stretching high to the sky. We're going to bring our arms up overhead and to do a side bend to our right side. And if we feel that keeping the hands together inhibits our side bend, we can bring our hand to our hip or let it slide down our leg. But we're keeping the shoulders stacked over each other. We're not letting this front top shoulder come forward. We're going to come back to center and go over to the opposite side. And again, we're aware of the placement of the shoulders, keeping them aligned, not letting there be any twist to the spine, and adjusting the hand as we like. Coming back towards center, we're going into our sun goddess. So we're going to step our feet apart. We're going to angle our feet toward the outside. We're going to test as we're coming down to make sure that we can see the knee coming out over the middle of our foot. Once we're sure of that, we don't have to adjust our heels in or out. We're going to come down slowly, gently, arms out to either side, stretching through the quads, chest. You can see what's going on around the knees, making sure they're comfortable, not straining at all. And we're going to come into a five-pointed star. Going as tall as we can, arms spreading out, tuning into our breath. And then we're going to come into our triangle. So we're going to start with our hands, even with our shoulders. We're going to take our back foot, turn it at an angle so it's halfway toward the front. Our front foot straight forward. We might want to widen the legs a little bit or keep them where they are. We're going to push our hips back, reach forward with our hand before we bring it down toward the floor or supporting ourselves on our leg. We're trying to get our spine even, parallel to the floor, no lower. So we want to use our core strength. Once we get bottom hand supporting us wherever is appropriate, we get our top shoulder pulling back over the bottom shoulder. Then we lift the arm up, coming straight in alignment with the bottom shoulder as well as the top. Thinking about pushing back a little more with the hips to get more stretch in the hamstring on that front leg. Thinking about using our core strength to keep our head at the same level as our hips. And then bringing that hand down. We're going to rotate around till we have the midline of our body on the inside of that front leg. We're going to pick up our back heel and turn it directly toward the front. We're going to tighten our abdominals, tighten our quadriceps, seeing how low we can get ourselves in toward our leg. That intense side stretch. And now we're going to take this to a lunge. Sanskrit name is Anjaneyasana. So we're going to bend our front knee, so knee and ankle are in alignment. We're going to come up and stand up tall. If we want to, we can step that back foot back further. We're going to make sure we're rotated, midline directly forward. We can bring our arms up and out to the side if we'd like. Stacking shoulders over hips. Trying to push a little bit harder through that back heel. Get the hips a little lower. Now we're going to bring our hands down. We're going to spin on our feet so that we can come facing out toward the side, coming into a side lunge. We want to keep this knee and ankle in alignment. We don't want to be swinging that knee forward. So we think maybe about taking this arm, bringing it down to our ankle so we can use that to leverage and keep that knee back. Maybe walk the opposite foot even further apart because we're trying to maximize the stretch through the inner thigh. Maybe bending that knee a little bit more, moving out toward the side rather than swinging the knee forward. And then we're going to switch our weight back to center. We might have to adjust our feet closer together or farther apart. But now we're going to turn the heels inward so that as we come into our squat, our knees are moving out over the middle of our foot. We can bring our hands to heart center in our Anjali Mudra, leveraging our elbows to the inside of our thighs, or we can stand taller with the hands resting on our legs, whatever suits us at this moment in time. Then we're going to push in and out to the opposite side. So we're stretching inner thigh muscle here. We're again trying to get this knee as much as we can over to the side without pulling it forward. So we can take this hand, put it down to our ankle, and use it as a guideline. Trying to sink those hips a little bit lower, get this leg a little lower, get a little bit further over toward the side so we can stretch even further through the inner thigh. And now we're going to turn around so we can go into our lunge on the opposite side. Again, we might have to adjust the distance between the feet so that we can feel stable as we come up into our warrior 1.5. So we think about length, heel and the back foot is off the ground. Feet are pointed directly forward as we use our core strength. Concentrate maybe on pulling up our pelvic floor, tightening our abdominal muscles, lining up our midline with the front of our body, shoulders stacked over hips. If we'd like, arms up and out. Hands down as we shift into our hamstring stretch. So now we want this back foot on the ground. We're going to step that foot probably further forward so that we can do that. Both feet now still directly forward. Hip hinge as we come down. So we always think about abdominals tightening, quads tightening, tailbone moves back, iliac crest comes forward, moving in the direction of the shoulders. Hands can rest on our leg if that's appropriate for us, all the way down to the floor. But then we think about muscles, especially core muscles, abdominals, getting tighter and tighter as we come down into our triangle. So we make sure that back foot now is turned a comfortable distance apart, but at an angle, the front foot is still directly forward. We're going to take our front hand, either let it rest on our leg or bring it to the floor, to the big toe side of the foot or the little, whichever is our usual place. We're going to take our opposite arm, make a fist with that hand, and imagine ourselves pulling a bow, getting that top shoulder pulled well back toward the wall behind us, elbow straight up, and then stretching the arm higher to the sky. Again, we're trying to make sure we're not sagging down, so we're using our core strength. If that means we get our arm higher, that's fine. And we're thinking about arm coming out of the shoulder and down to our hip as we press into our feet. Use our bandhas to come up back into our 5-pointed star. So we rotate our feet out to the sides so that the middle of the knee lines up. We bring our hands up, stretch as tall as we can into our sun goddess, fierce warrior, whatever we'd like to call this pose. Coming down, if we'd like to add a little bit more work through the ankles, the arches of the feet, we can pick up one heel or both together. If we pick up one heel, then we're going to alternate now. Then we're going to drop our feet. Slide our feet together, bringing our hands up overhead so we can do our lean to the side. Again, being cognizant of the alignment of the shoulders, being careful that as we're side bending, we're not twisting at the same time. We can adjust the hand placement before we come to center and go over to the opposite side. And still working on stretching through the side as well as challenging our balance. Because I am balance challenged, I'm going to move back so I can get some support of the wall behind me. If you are not balance challenged, you might be really comfortable just staying as far away from the wall as you choose. But we're going to externally rotate one leg, trying to get the knee as close as we can in alignment with the hips, bringing the heel to the opposite foot. We think about lifting through the arch of the feet, finding the strength in the quad. We're going to take our opposite arm, elbow out to the side, hand coming over toward the bent knee. Then we're going to take our hand and bring it up over the top and take another side bend. Really lifting the shoulder away from the rib cage. A challenge to our balance somewhat. But since we have both feet on the floor, maybe not as intense as it might otherwise be. And then coming back to center, we're in perfect position to move directly into our tree. So we can bring our hands to heart center. Or if it's easy for us to maintain our center of gravity, bringing our hands up first. But either way, we're going to try and lift this leg to a comfortable spot. It might be on the inside of the calf, it might be on the inside of the thigh, but we definitely do not want it pushing into the knee at all. So if we can't keep the foot totally above the knee, we're going to bring it down to the calf. And then we're going to snow angel the hands around, stretch our branches as high as we can to the sky, but we're working on keeping the shoulders and the hips in alignment with the front of our mat. We're working on tightening muscles on the outside of the hip, getting that knee closer to the wall. Now we're going to come down, we're going to switch to the opposite side. So we're going to do our externally rotation of the opposite leg, planting the heel on top of our foot, our balancing foot. We're going to think about length. We're going to take our other arm, bend at the elbow, bring it across our midsection before we stretch our hand up to the sky and do another side bend. Getting a lot of work on really lifting the shoulder blade away from the rib cage away from the hip, and then coming back to center and looking into our tree. So hands wherever we feel best suits our ability to move into this pose, lifting our foot to whatever height is appropriate for us, and if we like, hands to the sky. Working on glutes, gluteus medius and minimus on the side of the hip, maximus on the back, getting that knee out toward the side as far as we can before we bring our hands around. Now we're going to do some variations of poses that are going to take us doing upper body strengthening as well as a lot of work through the legs and hips. So we're going to start by coming into our fold, taking our time coming down, planting our hands on the floor as we bend our knees so we can come into a down dog. We're going to step our feet back a couple distance. And then we think about pushing back with our shoulders, our tailbones up to the sky, but we'd like not to have any bend through the shoulder area. So we think about our heart going toward our knees, our shoulders going toward our toes. We want to make sure we're not up on the toes. So we're going to pick our toes off the floor. If we're not on the balls of the feet or totally on the flat of the feet, then our feet are too far apart. We're going to step a little closer. We're trying to get a really good stretch by pushing that tailbone up, pushing our shoulders back toward our toes, getting that stretch through the top of the body, and then heels tight to the ground. We're going to pick up one foot, lift it high to the sky, but we're still trying to keep from bending through the shoulders. So we have to work through the shoulders still, push to the heel. We're going to then externally rotate that leg and swing it down to the floor. Once we have it dropped on the floor, we're going to take our other leg and we're going to drop the knee behind the ankle. Then we're going to see if we can rotate that leg a little further to the side before we start dropping lower and lower and lower and lower. Trying to get that leg as long as we can behind us. So we're getting a really good stretch on the outside of the hip. We're going to add to it that piriformis stretch that we get by getting our abdominal area, our torso down as low as we can into that bent knee. We're keeping the hips even. We're slowly coming down, enjoying the journey, making sure we don't feel any strain. We're making sure that the hips stay even, so we're not rolling over toward the long leg or the bent leg. And we're going to lower and lower and lower. The further down we can come, the more we're going to feel that stretch underneath that gluteus maximus on the back of that hip. If we want to, we can stack hand over hand for a resting place for our head, or put our fists side by side, coming lower. We can even bring our head all the way to the floor. And we're going to walk our hands back. We're going to take the arm with the bent leg, bring it down to the floor. And we're now going to do the opposite way. The straight leg arm down to the floor, the other arm out to the side behind our bent knee. And we're going to take this to a twist. We're still trying to keep the hips even. We're not going to roll over toward a long leg, but we're just going to pulse on that hip with a long leg and slide that belly across our bent leg, straightening out that arm, turning and looking over our shoulder. And we're going to slowly rotate toward the front, lining both feet, hands on the ground, both feet together. We're going to come into yet another down dog. So we're going to turn our toes under and going again for that inverted V, as straight as we can get, from our tailbone down through our feet. Checking to make sure that our feet are lining up with the middle of the heel with our sit bone, middle of the finger in front of the middle of our shoulder. Taking this to a plank of choice. So we can do a full plank. We can drop one knee if we'd like, or both knees. Then we're going to take this to a side plank. So bringing our right knee toward the middle of our body, we're going to rotate on our feet, come around to the side, lift our hand up to the sky. If this isn't working for us, we can take that bottom knee, drop it down to the floor, and take this pose to a more modified stretch, a little more work through the shoulder if we lift that leg then with the knee down. Coming back, we're going to drop all the way down to the floor so we can do some back strengthening in our cobra. We're going to bring our hands underneath our shoulders, middle of the finger lining up with the middle of the shoulder. Our thumbs are pointed toward our heart. We think about pushing tailbone into the ground, making length through the front of the body before we energize into our hand and lift upward. Arching the neck, but making sure we don't feel uncomfortable. We're not straining. And then we're going to push back. Getting ready for another down dog. So making sure we've got the alignment of feet and hands before we lift the knees. Tuck the tailbone up. And then we're going to take this to our warrior series to work a little bit more on our bone density, ankle, knee, hip strength. So we're going to swing our foot forward, comfortable distance apart, front foot forward, directly toward the front, back foot turned at an angle. Once we have our feet at the distance we think we want, we're going to come up and stand up. We're going to think about maybe getting the feet a little wider apart, maybe rocking back and forth till we feel that we're at a comfortable distance. We want to bend in that front knee, so maybe it's just a little bit of one. Maybe it's much more exaggerated, more of a 90-degree angle. But we make sure that we feel stable. That back heel never leaves the floor. The outer edge of the foot never leaves the floor. We twist without bringing this knee forward, making sure it's going to feel like we're pushing it back behind us, but we're actually just keeping it over the ankle. Then we're going to stretch our arms forward and back. We're going to reverse this by bringing our hand down, going for height first before we stand. So bend over backward. And then coming forward, taking this to our Parsvakonasana. Trying to get as much of a bend as we can. If we want to adjust our feet closer or further away, but we're making a straight line from our foot through our hip to our shoulder. We're not dropping down into our front leg. We're just going to swing that arm around, and we're then going to think, can we push that foot a little further back? Can we drop the hips a little lower without losing the alignment that we want in the front leg? We're going to take this hand down to the floor. We're going to rotate around toward the front so that we have our hand toward the inside, big toe side of that front foot. We've got the midline of our body lining up with the inside of that leg. Then we're going to pulse into our back foot, rotate your belly, ribcage, heart, turn around, lift that hand up to the sky. And again, the hand moves up from the shoulder. We get the shoulder in place first. We think about twisting a little bit more through the belly, ribcage, heart. And then we're going to bring that hand down to the floor so that we can start and do all those poses again on the opposite side. So hands flat on the ground, we bring our feet together into our down dog. And now we're going to do our pigeon kapotasana on the opposite side. So we lift the leg, opposite leg from the one we did before, as high as we can without letting the shoulders fall forward. Maybe pushing through the heel, pushing through the heel of the supporting leg, equally on both shoulders. Bringing the knee out to the side, external rotation as we bring the foot behind our hips. And then we swing it forward down to the ground, dropping the opposite knee behind our ankle, seeing if we can leverage a little bit more out to the side before we start driving that long leg back and bringing ourselves gradually lower and lower down into the floor. And then bent knee hand comes to the outside of the knee, bent elbow, the other hand supports us in the front. Without letting the long leg hip drop closer to the floor, we're going to pulse on the glutes. We're going to work through the belly, work through the rib cage, turn around to the side. A nice twist, massaging those internal organs. Now we're going to come back to center. We're going to come into another down dog. Just for the sake of the camera, I'm going to move around in the opposite direction, but you can stay facing in the same one you're at. We're going to go into our plank after we do our down dog. So we line up the hands, we make sure that we're pressing through the knuckle, the pads of the fingers, belly drops, chin into chest. We lift and push back. Forward into plank of choice, we can have the knees down, but we're either way pulling the shoulder blades in toward each other. That retraction, then you're pressing toward our waistline. Our side plank with the knee down or up as we choose. And then back down to the floor. If we feel as though we need a little relaxation for the rest, we're welcome to do some wrist circles. And we're going back either into our cobra, if that's our preference, or if we'd rather, we can do our up dog. A little bit more work through the hands, the arms, the shoulders. And if we're doing up dog, we might want to move our hands closer to the bottom of the rib cage. But it's the same thing we did before. Slight internal rotation of legs so the heels are slightly out. We push the tailbone into the ground. We go from leg through the front of the body before we push up, and if we'd like, lifting the knees off the floor or not. And then dropping down. Coming back into yet another down dog so we can come into our warrior poses. Again, checking in alignment of hands and feet as we lift up, checking the distance to make sure that we can pick the toes. If we can't do that, that means we're too far back. We've got to step further forward. Pushing shoulders back toward toes. And then swinging one leg forward, hitting the wall. Bringing the other leg back at a comfortable distance. And obviously to stay on camera, I'm going to have to move forward. And again, if you want to rock back and forth a little bit to make sure we're getting, especially that front leg, comfortably situated, we're going to put whatever bend in that knee our leg can tolerate, keeping knee and ankle in alignment, turning our shoulders and hips so they're squared away before we bring our arms forward and back. Reversing our warrior, hand down, arm up over the top. Parshvakonasana, forearm resting on our thigh. Dropping just low enough to get a straight line from the shoulder to the hip to the foot. Maybe widening the legs a little bit, maybe pushing the hips lower, as long as we can see the big toe. And then hand up. Coming down and around into our twist. If the back heel's coming off the floor, the outer edge of the foot, our feet are too far apart, we're going to shift our weight forward onto our hands and our front foot so that we can adjust that back foot. Then we're going to pulse on the hip with a long leg, rotate through belly, rib cage, heart, turn around so that we're trying to bring ourselves as much of a turn with the top shoulder pulling back. And then once it's in place, lifting the opposite hand. And then rotating back towards center. Dropping both knees to the floor. And if we need to, we can do either working on the wrists or on the back, doing some cat and cow, whatever seems appropriate, before we come down to a seated position. We're going to swing our legs around. And we're going to start by doing our archer with one leg. So we're going to bend through the knee. We're going to grab onto the foot. We can do 2 fingers and a thumb around the toe. We can hold the inside, outside, or even the back of the leg. But we're going to lift that leg. We're trying to stretch in the hamstring. So we're pulling it back as far as we can underneath our armpit. We're keeping our spine long and straight. Pulling back, pulling back. And now we're going into our cradle of baby. So we're just going to take other hand to hold onto our foot and swing that baby in its cradle in and out. If we want more stretch through the leg, working on the same muscles we did in our pigeon, we can bring our arm around to the front of the leg, trying to see if we can get our foot in the crook of the elbow, and then bringing our other arm around. We're still not letting the shoulders round. We're still doing the retraction and depression. And then we're going to release that foot. We're going to drop it all the way down to the floor. Depending on how the knees feel today, the hamstrings, this lower back, we might want to bring that foot further forward or further away from our straight leg. But if we can, we're going to bring that heel as tight as we can in toward our pubic bone. Working the muscles of this knee is going to get our knee closer to the floor. Pushing through the heel of this foot is going to continually engage the muscles around the ankle, the calf. We're going to sit up nice and tall, tighten quad, tighten abdominals, come into our same pelvic tilt as we come down. And trying to get our elbows closer to the ground. We're trying to get our back low into our leg first before we think about working the muscles in the upper shoulder by slowly walking our arms further forward. Reaching out maybe toward our feet, maybe not. If we easily reach our feet, then thinking about elbows closer toward the floor. And then releasing our hands and sitting up. We're going to take this to a spinal twist. So we're going to pulse on the muscles on the side of the long leg. Rotate through the belly, the rib cage. Turn around and bringing our supporting hand as close as we can to our midline. Trying to get our shoulders turned so that they're lining up with our long leg, not letting that back shoulder collapse. So actively working the muscles on the back of that shoulder, trapezius. The rhomboid pulls our shoulder blade in toward our spine. And now we're going to stay turned to the side, still keeping our shoulders lined up with this long leg. We're going to take our front hand, bring it down to the floor, thumb up to the sky, bring our back hand high. We're going to take this to a side bend without twisting. The goal is not to reach our foot. The goal is to get as much of a movement through this side as we can. So we're going to slowly lean forward, bringing our elbow as low as we can to the inside of our knee. We might be able to reach our front hand or our front foot. We don't care if we do. We are much more concerned about keeping our shoulders stacked. So rather than going like this as we're doing our side bend, we're just going to leave the hand up higher. Deep breath in as we sit up tall. Doing a little bit more core strengthening. We're going to take our bent leg, plant our foot flat on the floor, lift our opposite leg into our boat pose. Shoulder blades pulling down and back again. If we want to get more work to the abs, we're just going to tighten them and pull our belly forward in toward our thighs. We're keeping the knees even. We don't want to let the foot drop so that the knee comes lower. We can bend the leg if we need to. And then dropping that foot to the floor. Maybe lifting and lowering the knees, shaking them out. And I'm going to rotate around to the opposite side again. You can stay facing in the direction, but obviously we want to be working the opposite leg. So we're going to start again with our archer. We're going to take our leg, we're going to bend at the knee, we're going to take grip that best suits as we keep our shoulder blades pulling down and back, keep that back long and tall and straight, and just work on pulling that knee as far as we can back behind us so that we can maximize the stretch on the hamstring, being careful we're not feeling any strain in the knee. Into our cradle to baby. And again, if we'd like, we can take our arm in front and try and put the foot in the crook of our elbow, and then bring the hand around to the side. If that doesn't work, we're fine. Just continuing to rock the baby in the cradle. And we're going to release that hand, making sure we're sitting up tall, that our spine's perpendicular to the floor. And again, we'll adjust this leg as we need to. We may find there's a considerable difference on one side than the other. Knee might be closer to the floor. We might have to adjust the foot in a different angle. We will do what we need to make sure that we are not causing any strain as we go into our Janushirasana. So we're going to sit up nice and tall, spine as tall as we can get it. Hip hinge. Remembering that we don't round through the shoulders and pull the shoulders forward first. We go through lower torso into upper leg before we walk those hands further down. And then releasing our hands and sitting up. We're going to take this to our twist again. So it's always by working with muscles on this side, gluteus medius and minimus, gluteus maximus on the back as well. Pulsing, tightening up and twisting through the abdominal area, through the rib cage, turning around to the side, trying to get this back hand close enough to us so that we don't have to pull the shoulders back. Spine stays perpendicular to the floor. We think about trying to get the shoulders as closely lined up with the long leg as we can by keeping active work on the muscles of the upper shoulder. We can take our other hand and gently press on the inside of our bent leg if we want to try and get it closer to the floor. But thinking that it is muscle that moves the bone. We're going to stay lined up just as we are. Take our front hand right next to our long leg with the thumb up toward the sky, other hand straight up to the sky. And remembering that we want to keep this alignment of the shoulders. We don't want to let this back shoulder start twisting out toward our foot. And we just start leaning over slowly. Remembering that moving slowly helps us notice when we're hitting the wall. It also gets the muscles more relaxed so that we get a better range of motion when we move slowly. And then deep breath in, sitting up tall. Into our half boat, we're going to take our bent leg, plant our foot flat on the floor, so that we can then lift the other leg so that the knees, thighs are even with each other, hands out to either side or holding onto the backs of our legs. Either way, scapular depression, and then trying to pull our entire torso forward before we drop our feet to the floor. Now we're going into our butterfly, our Baddha Konasana. So we're going to think about bringing the soles of the feet together. We've been working on loosening up through the legs, so we might be able to get our heels pretty close into our tailbone. If not, that's fine to have the feet further forward. And we're thinking about holding onto our feet, taking our thumbs across the top of our toes, our fingers along the bottom, and really giving those toes a good stretch. Sitting up nice and tall. Lengthening through the spine, tightening muscles on the outside of the hips. Now we're going to take this to a back bend, so hands going to plant the floor on either side of our hips, externally rotated. We're going to push the belly forward. We're going to think about length through the front of the torso as we pull the shoulder blades tight together, lift our chin up to the sky. Thinking about really arching the back as we tighten the muscles up and down the spine. We're probably going to feel some more extra work to those adductor muscles on the inner thigh. And then we're going to slowly sit forward. We're going to bring our hands to our feet. We can either bring our hands to the backs of our legs, maybe putting our index finger behind our knees. We can hold on to the backs of our thighs. We can grab onto our ankles. I am going to wrap 2 fingers and a thumb around the big toe, but if we do that, we make sure we're pushing the toe inward. We're not bending the toe back on itself. We're going to take this to a balancing pose. So, as always, shoulder blades retracted in the crust. As we pull backward, we're going to bring our feet together. And we're going to take this to a full boat, so we're going to straighten out our legs. Trying to bring our feet as close as we can together in front. And again, we're still pulling those shoulder blades down toward our spine. And then if we'd like, slowly opening the legs to either side. And we're going to come back into our butterfly and come down to the floor. Making sure our spine is straight. Letting our knees flop out to either side. We're going to spread our hands on either side. And then as we bring our right knee up toward the sky and then let it flop over on top of the left, we're going to bring our right hand up and over the top so that we can roll onto our left hip and bring our hands together. Deep breath in, stretching that hand up to the sky as we roll from shoulder to shoulder blade to spine. Opposite shoulder blade to shoulder as we open the legs back into our butterfly. Up again. And opening. Up again. And opening. And now leaving our arms as they are, we're going to take this to a spinal twist just by taking the right knee up to the sky and dropping it over on top of the left. As we do that, we're trying to really work on the inner thigh muscles on the top leg to get the knees as close as we can together. We might want to pull the heels a little bit closer in toward our tailbone so that we can come a little bit more into our left hip, really squeeze the glutes on the top hip to get the hips stacking over each other so that we can get a really good diagonal twist, massaging our internal organs. Now we're going to bring the knees up. Plant our feet flat on the floor, make sure our spine is nice and straight. Drop those knees open again into our butterfly. And we'll do the same thing on lifting up the arm, lifting the legs, bringing them together out toward the right before we open both the arms and the legs. And as we bring those arms across, making sure that we're not leading with the hand or the arm, we're going from shoulder to shoulder blade to spine. in both directions. That hand never pulls the rest of the body behind us. And the next time we get our arms open, we're going to keep them open, but now we're going to move the legs. We're going to try and bring the knees as close as we can toward the floor together. And again, if we want to adjust the feet, maybe pulling the feet a little bit closer in toward our tailbone gets our ability to get the knees close to the floor a little more easily done. We're going for that twisting motion just as if we were wringing out a dish rag. Trying to maximize the work we're doing on loosening up the stress through the spine, the lower back, at the same time getting rid of all the toxins in our internal organs, getting them a fresh supply of blood and oxygen. And then knees to the sky, straightening out our spine. Maybe just walking the feet a little further apart as we slowly pull our hands closer to the side, getting ready for our final relaxation, whichever way we'd like. If we want to, we can come into our corpse pose. We can come into a fetal pose on the side. Because it is so good for the circulation of my legs, I always try to finish my final relaxation with my Viparita Karani, legs up the wall, to reduce the swelling, to improve the circulation through my legs. And we can stay as long as we'd like in whichever pose we're in, just tuning to our breath, letting that concentration on the breath be our movement inward, away from our concerns and cares and worries, to the peace within. Breathing in serenity as we breathe out stress. Breathing in tranquility as we breathe out tension. Focusing on the breath so much that we let go of thoughts. Finding ourselves in the space between our thoughts. In the quiet of our breath. Peace rising with the inhale and the outhale. We can stay as long as we'd like in this resting position. Whenever we're ready, we'll just pull our knees in toward our chest, gently rock side to side, so that we can roll over on our right side and come up to a seated pose. Stretching our hands high to the sky, palms down to heart center. I will wish you namaste.